The front door opens, your backpack drops on the floor. The house is quiet, too quiet. No voices, no parents, just the hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the kitchen. Most teenagers come home to someone asking how their day was. But you didn't. You came home to an empty house, and if you grew up in the 80s, that may have shaped your mind in ways most people don't notice. You walk inside, drop your backpack. Maybe you pour a bowl of cereal. Maybe you turn on the TV. Not because you're watching it, just because the house feels less empty that way. And if you grew up in the 80s, you probably know this moment exactly. School ends. You ride your bike home. You unlock the door yourself, and suddenly, you're responsible for the next few hours. No one checking homework. No one asking where you're going, just you. And the quiet house. Most people don't realize how unusual that experience was, but millions of teenagers lived it. They were called Latchkey kids, teenagers who came home every day to an empty house. If you were one of them, you probably recognized certain habits. You learned to figure things out yourself. You made your own snacks, sometimes dinner too. You watched TV while doing homework. You memorized phone numbers because you actually had to dial them. And if you wanted to see a friend, you didn't text them. You rode your bike to their house and knocked on the door. Sometimes no one answered, so you just rode somewhere else. Another friend, another street, another afternoon adventure, and over time, something interesting starts to happen. You stop expecting someone to guide you. You just figure things out. You probably already know this feeling. When something goes wrong, your first instinct isn't to ask for help. It's to solve it. Quietly, on your own, but this reveals something much bigger. Most people think latchkey kids became independent because they were forced to, but that's not exactly what happened. Something else was happening in the background. Psychologists call it environmental adaptation. Your brain adjusts to the environment it grows up in. When you grow up with constant supervision, your brain expects guidance. But when you grow up with freedom, your brain learns something different. It learns that you are responsible for solving problems. And that changes how you think. Small example. Imagine a teenager today forgetting their homework. They might text their parents, ask for help. But a latchkey teenager in the 80s? You already know what they would do. They improvise, borrow a friend's notes, or solve it themselves. That pattern repeats thousands of times. And slowly, the brain builds a habit. Solve problems first, ask later. Or sometimes, never ask at all. But there's another psychological layer here. Something most people miss. You weren't just alone, you were trusted. And that changes everything. Psychologists sometimes talk about self-efficacy, which simply means your belief in your ability to handle things. Latchkey kids develop this early, because every afternoon they practiced it. Let's say the power goes out, or dinner burns, or a friend calls needing help. You deal with it, not because you're fearless, but because there's no one else home. And after years of this, your brain quietly rewires itself. Problems stop feeling scary, they just feel like puzzles. But here's the paradox, and this is where things get interesting. The 80s were a strange transition period. Technology was limited. There were no smartphones, no internet, no GPS. If you wanted information, you looked it up. In a book. If you wanted to talk to someone, you called them. On a corded phone. If they weren't home, you didn't know where they were. You just waited. And when communication is slower, something interesting happens. Your brain develops patience and independence. When answers aren't instant, your mind learns to think longer. When supervision isn't constant, your brain learns to solve problems, and latchkey teenagers experience this more than anyone. But then something strange happened. You grew up in an analog world, but you became adults in a digital one. You learned independence before constant connection existed, which means you understand both worlds. You know how to figure things out alone, but you also know how fast modern life moves And that combination creates a very unique mindset. You probably know someone exactly like this, someone who rarely asks for help, someone who just quietly solves things. Maybe you're even thinking of someone right now, or maybe that person is you. Here's what most people misunderstand about latchkey kids. They assume growing up alone created loneliness, but often it created something else: confidence. You learn to manage your own time. You learn to entertain yourself. You learned how to navigate the world without constant instructions. And those skills don't disappear. They stay with you at work, in relationships, in stressful situations. While others panic, you pause because your brain remembers something. You've handled things alone before, and you can do it again. You weren't raised to depend on people. You were raised to handle things. Think about that for a moment. Most people never notice this, but it explains a lot. Why some people feel calm when things go wrong. Why some people prefer figuring things out alone. Why some people rarely panic under pressure. Their brain learned early that problems are just something you deal with. So if you were a latchkey teenager in the 80s, those quiet afternoons may have shaped you more than you realize. Not through lessons, not through advice, but through experience. The empty house, the responsibility, the freedom. And over time, your brain adapted to that environment. It learned independence, problem solving, and quiet confidence. But here's something interesting. There's another generation that grew up in the opposite environment: constant connection, constant communication, constant supervision. And their psychology developed very differently. And once you notice that contrast, you start seeing generational behavior in a completely new way. So now I'm curious, when something goes wrong, do you immediately ask someone for help? Or do you instinctively try to solve it yourself first?